Shifting focus for now to the United States. As if Ukraine was not enough, Joe Biden is also being tested by the conflict in Israel. In fact, the U.S. is actively engaged in both parts of the world. But for the leader, in addition to the crises overseas, there is a challenging re-election campaign at home as well. Up until his Israel visit and a subsequent Oval Office address, Biden was not exactly impressing the American electorate. Biden's campaign for 2024 was being weighed down by the low approval ratings and concerns regarding fitness. In fact, 4 national polls conducted mostly or entirely after the president's initial October 10th speech, but before the Israel visit, showed approval ratings stuck between 30 and 45%. As you can see, all the surveys giving you the bigger picture and showing that a majority of American voters disapproved of Biden's presidency. Those numbers are there for you to see. Now, poll strategists also feel that even if Biden successfully steers his country through the latest global crisis, any political lift that he might enjoy could be short-lived. Perceptions of a bad economy have continued to drag down his re-election prospects, and domestic concerns have historically superseded foreign policy in American presidential contests. But it's also true that the current conflicts abroad, especially the one in Ukraine and its funding, are now also impacting America's domestic politics. So Biden's handling of the crisis could still turn the tide for the incumbent president.
Because even where we have some differences, my commitment to Israel, as you know, is ironclad. I think without Israel, there's not a Jew in the world that's secure. I think Israel is essential. And I look forward to discussing all of this with you and working together with your team to... Good afternoon, folks. I'm not introducing me, Mark is.
Let's go straight across now to political analyst and international affairs expert Stephen Golub, who's joining us on the broadcast. Thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for the factors that involve Biden's popularity ratings. To what extent do you see the Israel-Hamas war actually impacting his approval ratings? Because we saw the numbers, and the war so far has not really helped his popularity rankings.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Ironically, in terms of substantive accomplishments, both foreign and domestic policy, President Biden is probably the most accomplished president we've had since Franklin Delano Roosevelt nearly a century ago. But you're absolutely right. He's not doing well in the polls. I'd say there are at least 2 factors operating there. One is his age, or the perception that he's too old to be president. He's doing a great job as president, but not a great job as a candidate. He comes across sometimes as frail, as a poor communicator. And another factor is, while inflation is coming down in the United States, people still remember lower prices from years ago, and they hold it against him that the prices aren't as low as they were a few years ago before the pandemic. Now, in terms specifically of the Middle East, it's really hard to tell. It depends how this whole war conflict, very difficult situation plays out, whether it expands. But we can say this. Generally, a presidential candidate who's very pro-Israel is strengthened by the perception of their being pro-Israel. However, Biden could lose some votes on the left, particularly among younger voters who are less pro-Israel and generally more pro-Palestinian. Again, it's hard to tell exactly how that will play out until we see how the conflict itself plays out.
Indeed, and talking about his popularity rankings, can he still manage to turn the tide? As far as the conflict is concerned, like you're saying, there's a lot that remains to be seen. But what would the voters expect from him as far as his stance on the Israel-Hamas war is concerned?
Well, it depends on which voters we're talking about. But I'd say generally they want him to support Israel. If American lives start getting lost in this conflict, then that could change the dynamic. If, for example, Israel and Hezbollah escalate to a full-fledged war, which is possible, making it a two-front war. And if the United States then weighs in on Israel's side, not so much by troops on the ground, but let's say by bombing Hezbollah positions, and U.S. fighter pilots get shot down, that could conceivably change the dynamic for the worse for him politically. One thing I might add, though, is that his visit to Israel, combined with his visit to Ukraine a number of months ago, both in the middle of war or conflict situations, could actually help his campaign next year in that he'll be able to say to people, look, I went to these conflict zones. I stood up for allies. I showed how strong I am while Donald Trump was busy hiding national security documents in his bathroom in his estate, which is something he's actually being prosecuted for now.
Stephen Golub, thanks very much for being here on the broadcast and sharing those perspectives.
Thanks for having me.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.